So Jack Dorsey, first one, Twitter CEO, stepping down. Officially steps down with his role effective immediately. Dorsey co-founded Twitter with Evan Williams, Biz Stone, and Noah Glass back in 2006 and served as a CEO until 2008. He later returned to the CEO role in 2015, and former CEO Dick Costello stepped down. He has a net worth of approximately $11.8 billion. There's a lot of talk about the importance of a company being founder-led. Dorsey said in an email to employees. Ultimately, I believe that severely limiting in a single point of failure. I've worked hard to ensure this company can break away from its founding and founders. Dorsey will be replaced by Twitter CTO Parag Agrawal. Your thoughts on this move taking place yesterday?
So I think Dorsey's hated that company for about 10 years now.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
He's at odds with the company. Like, here's the thing. I said before, he's a communist who thinks he's a libertarian. And so he's got this major conflict in that, he quotes Mises and talks about Bitcoin. But ultimately, the behavior of things, like, it's one thing to be, hey, let's talk about sound money, but actually I've got this platform that's known for its political censorship and for doing what the Communist Party in China asks for when necessary and these different things. And it's like, if you don't behave the same on Friday night as you do on Sunday morning, then I don't like you as a person, fundamentally.
In fairness, and not that I make, not that I want to be the guy defending Jack Dorsey here, but if you believe what Joe Rogan has to say, he's been advocating for free speech on Twitter, and he's been overruled by his own board for years. So much so that he tried to do a spin-off called like Twitter Dark or something like that, where it was basically going to be a, Twitter and 4chan, where it was anything goes, free speech, upvoting system. And he was, again, he was denied by his board. So, I mean, if you believe that story, this is a guy who's been eaten by his own success. He doesn't even have the say in his own company.
I don't know, man. When you're the captain of a ship, if the ship gets out of control, I think that's your fault. Like, at what point were the decisions made that allowed a bunch of nasty social justice warriors to be in charge of the whole company? Like, these are a lot of little decisions that led to that at some point. Mm-hmm. And so I think he's got to own that. And I think that's a lot of lip service, because I think in theory he doesn't want to lose his street cred as like the cool guy with a nose ring.
In Silicon Valley?
Right. It's just the whole thing. It's like, well, I'm going to be this disruptive libertarian guy, but I'm also very San Francisco and everything else. And it's just they can't be both. And he didn't choose. So he's been riding the fence for a decade trying to make Twitter.
Outside of Twitter, he has a chance to make it right, though. Which I'm excited for Jack Dorsey's second act. If he can come out and do what he wanted to do, if there's a chance to do a secondary, social media channel that promotes free speech, he can save his legacy.
And we'll see. I don't know.
The thing that he pretty much put out there, and my question is, how big of a concern is making money to him or increasing his net worth? Because I think his net worth is $12 billion, somewhere around that. And he said that he'd want his sole focus now to be on Square. And obviously everything that Square is doing in the crypto space, and it's going to be backed by Bitcoin. And I mean, Twitter, I think, is down double digits percentages here. You look at someone like Zuck, who's worth over $100 billion. They're up 20% this year. And he looks at Square and says, that's a better opportunity to make more money. Yep. How much of a motivation is to basically increase his net worth?
It's hard to know. I think Square, Square's a big proponent of the Lightning Network and the whole BTC narrative. They're part of what's called the Crypto Open Patent Alliance, which I think is another nasty cabal of people that just want to control things. Similar, like connected to the Barry Silbert people and all of this. Like, there's a group of people that want to, again, pretend that they're disruptors, pretend that they're libertarians, pretend that they're going to do all these big things. Mm-hmm. And ultimately it's like, yeah, but everybody behind me, like, yeah, I'm going to lunch with world bankers and doing all this other stuff. And really, I think it's a LARP. I think the whole thing is like, look, man, I'm cool. You can use Square and pretend it's Bitcoin and all this stuff. Like, but keep using Square here. I think he's a money man.
But also all of our employees are going to have critical theory training and
right.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Let me tell you what I just did right now. While you guys were going out, I was doing a little bit of research. Hey, can you pull up this article? Type in Jack Dorsey says Trump's Twitter ban was right decision. This is an NPR article. I want to read this to you, and then I want to answer a question about what you said and what you said that you guys made me think Trump's Trumos, Donald Trumos from Paris.
A nice Greek boy.
Yeah, right there. All right, so check this out. So you just said you brought up him he's the captain of the ship. He's got this option, all this other stuff. And you said Rogan, et cetera, et cetera. He says, look, I'd love to have some kind of a second option, Twitter. And I remember when that conversation took place. What percentage of Twitter do you think he owns?
I don't even know.
I want you to guess it. I want you to guess what percentage do you think he owns?
If I had to spitball, I'd probably say 20 or 30%.
30%.
Okay, cool.
30%.
20 or 30%. What do you think he owns?
I'd say a little less than that.
Okay, so here's what I want you to type.
15%.
I want you to type Jack Dorsey total shares of Twitter, and look what comes up. You guys are all going to be shell-shocked. Jack Dorsey total shares of Twitter. Okay, Twitter. There you go. Ready? 22 million shares, which is only 3% of Twitter.
3%.
He's a nobody. So here's what this means when you're 3%. Okay, Steve Jobs got fired even though he owned most shares.
Yep.
When he got a board, the board is a board. You ain't got nothing. Listen, you can be whoever you are. So for us to go that position, I don't think he has as much influence as you think he does to do what he did with Trump or all this other stuff. He may have an opinion. I don't think it's a good idea, but the board is going to. I'm in these board meetings all the time, and believe me, I kind of know how these things work. So now go to the other article, what he said about Trump. So Jack Dorsey says Trump's Twitter ban was right decision, but worries about president. So go down and see what he tweets out. He says, I do not celebrate or feel pride in having to ban Donald Trump for Twitter or how we got here. After clear warning, we take this action. We, the board, made a decision with the best information we had based on threats to physical safety, both on and off Twitter. Was this correct? And he opens it up and people are going back and forth. Yes, no, maybe, whatever. Now, deep down inside, did he want to take him off or on? I don't know. Did it make sense to do it or not? I don't know. Was most of his board probably an anti-Trump board? I would be willing to bet 99% of the board can't stand Trump. I don't think they're going to have for example, Kellyanne Conway sits on Twitter's board. That's probably not going to be happening anytime soon, or Ted Cruz or any of those guys, right? So is there a part of it where the guy's got a difficult job. They started a company that, to be honest with you, is probably one of the most powerful companies that determine elections. You go immediately find out what debates are taking place, issues taking place, immediate reaction. It's a very, very
It's kind
powerful.
of the pulse of America, right?
I don't know. I mean, it's a pretty powerful company. Trump wouldn't become a president without Twitter. Take Twitter out. Trump's not the president, just so you know that.
Yeah.
If Twitter's not there, Trump's not the president, Hillary Clinton's the president. So for the people that hate him as much as they do, you may want to thank Twitter, because without Twitter, there is no Trump. Hillary Clinton would have been your president. That's one part. Now, what he does next, I don't know. Whether he is a communist, whether he's a libertarian, I have no idea what next moves he's going to make. The real question now becomes who's the next guy taking over and who sits on Twitter's board. Can you pull up who sits on Twitter's board?
Well, it's interesting that you say, that he was a nobody, too, because his first time on Rogan, it was really off-putting. I forget her name. There was a woman, very, very intelligent woman, but it was very clear that she knew the day-to-day operations of what was going on behind the scenes and the decisions being made, and he didn't. He kept deferring to her to answer Rogan's questions.
Okay, so
because he wasn't the CEO for like 5 years.
All right, so check this out. So here's the board of Twitter. Brett Taylor, independent board chair, president and chief operating officer, Salesforce. Okay, cool. So that's from Salesforce. Salesforce is Mark Benioff. Mark Benioff bought Time Magazine. That's an anti-Trump guy. That's a liberal left side. Parag Agrawal, we know what position he's at now and where he was at politically. He is not necessarily the biggest supporter of freedom of speech. I don't know if you guys seen what he tweeted out about freedom of speech. Have you seen what he said about freedom of speech? He's conflicted with freedom of speech. He doesn't think it needs to be as open as possible. You may want to pull up his name, type in Parag Agrawal, tweet freedom of speech.
It's kind of not a gray area conversation. You're either for freedom of speech or you're not for
freedom of speech. Tweet. Speech, tweet, pull that up. So this is the board. Okay, go, one said to company. Okay, there you go. Click on that one right there, Fox Business, the bottom. He says, one said, not to be bound by, okay, keep going up, keep going up, keep going up. Go up a little bit higher till we find a tweet. Okay. Keep going higher, see if we can.
3%.
All right, go back and just go to images. Go back and type in images. It'll come up if you type in images. Yeah, he said so.
If they are not going to make a distinction between Muslims and extremists, then why should I distinguish between white people and racists?
That's a little bit concerning, by the way, right? So click on that, click on that, click on that. That's a little bit concerning. If they're not going to make a distinction between Muslims and extremists, then why should I distinguish between white people and racist. So the verdict is still out. We don't know who this guy is. Anyways, the board chose him. Jack Dorsey did not choose him. The board chose him. Now, Jack says in his email, this was my first option as well. This is who I wanted. He's my first-round draft pick. Go back to the board of Twitter. I'm actually just curious right now at this point on who sits on the board. So then you got Mimi, Senior Vice President, Private Partnership at MasterCard. Okay, cool. Jack Dorsey, got it. Which, by the way, in May, he's stepping down from the board as well. Co-CEO at Silver Lake, 100%. Lucky Voice Group, former co-founder, manager, and director of Last Minute. Cool, got it. He's former executive chairman of Twitter. Cool. Professor at Stanford. Makes sense. Good university. General partner in Vineyards at
Born in
at
Beijing,
Google.
China, by the way, Fei-Fei Li.
Who's that? Fei-Fei Li.
Yeah.
Makes sense. CEO for some of that Inc. Former chairman and board of directors at Alliance Bernstein Holding Company. Okay, so that's who.
How many people in total? 11?
I think it's either 9 or 11. Go up. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 9.
Okay. Is there? How many is it important to distinguish between 9 versus 11 versus 7? Does it make a difference?
3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15. It's whatever the odd number.
It's always an odd number.
Has to
though.
be. Can't
How
be even.
does somebody give up 97% of their company? That's like
That's if you keep raising
a lot of money.
Well, you have to know. Here's a question for you. What is the business model for Twitter to make money? You actually think, how many times have you spent money on Twitter? It's only advertisers.
Yep.
Okay, so you have to know the business model isn't really a business model.
I just assume they're selling information.
You need a lot of money.
Data.
You need a lot of money. So
Data, the new currency.
to sustain, like, what do you think YouTube was sold for? Do you know what YouTube was sold for?
No, it was $7
billion.
7 wasn't. I thought it was more. I thought it was
$1
like,
billion.
Oh.
It's a
Same
billion
as
or $2 billion.
Instagram.
So because YouTube eventually got so big where the guys didn't have advertising figured out, you don't have capacity for servers. It keeps crashing. So you're like, dude, I'm going to go raise some money. You can't afford to do this anymore. So I'm not surprised he's worth 3%. So Jack Dorsey is not as influential as people think within Twitter community. That's the point I'm trying to make with it.
Or so
Anyways.
the bigger lesson is the founder is not as influential as you would assume.
It depends
Right?
at what phase. At
can
what
be.
phase.
It really
Yeah.
depends. It depends on the company
Yeah.
structure and why it grew into what it did. And then this is why I would again put the pressure back on Jack Dorsey though and say, hey man, the company looks the way it looks because of your executive leadership over the last 15-ish years. You know, like that's again.
Nobody
to your point,
is
Russ
saying,
Ulbricht has never sold a drug in his life, but he created a platform where people sold drugs and arms, and now he's spending the rest of his life in jail. So.
Yeah, nobody's saying the onus isn't on him.
Yeah.
You know, like yesterday I'm talking to Jack Carr. I don't know if you know who Jack Carr is, the Navy SEAL who wrote all those books, New York Times bestsellers. And I asked him a question. I said, okay, so we talked about Afghanistan. I said, here's a question for you. I said, take the general of the Army, the General Air Force, the General Marines, take all the main generals of whatever the 4 branches are that we have, right? And the president, commander-in-chief says, let's get out of Afghanistan, okay? You're on the ground, and you're saying, this ain't the right strategy, right? There's no way this is the right move we're making. We're going to leave all this shit to the Taliban. They're going to come and ruin people's lives here in Afghanistan. 20 years we've been working here.
But you got to follow orders.
I said, but here's the question. No, that's not the question. The question is, nobody becomes the general of the Army, Marines, Air Force, or Navy, and you don't have a strong personality. Nobody. And by the way, the general of any of these organizations, it's not like you're a yes man person, right? Let me sit there and say, hey, I'm sorry, guys, this is a shitty strategy. I'm going to have to push back. Hey, President, this is not a good move. I'm telling you, my suggestion is we do this, right? There's got to be pushback. You're there. You know more than the president does. You're trying to tell him here's not the right move, right? Okay. So, but the president says what? Here's what we're doing. To me, this becomes like who is really running a company on Twitter? Mm-hmm. Is it the generals running it? In this instance, if you see Twitter's interview with Jack and the other lady that was there, it seemed like the operators are running it. Jack's not really as involved. He was more the figurehead. So sometimes you're more distant. You no longer have the kind of influence that you had. You just kind of are there on the board because you have certain special information that maybe others don't have. But you kind of like, listen, it's cool, Jack. And Jack's more saying, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? What do you guys think? Rather than what to do. So I don't know. I don't know how much of it is him running it. I think this was kind of coming. It'll be interesting to see what this guy does next. He's definitely not going to be going away, I don't think, but we'll see. So if you enjoyed this little short segment from the podcast that we did, here's another short segment to watch. Or if you want to see the entire podcast, click over here. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.